Hey, good morning, guys. Today's activity is revolving around keystone species, and we're going to be working on keystone species today and tomorrow. Okay, and the reason being because the keystone species is what their name sounds like. They're very, very vital to an ecosystem. So they're the species that has a very large effect on the whole ecosystem and the whole food web of that ecosystem. So like if you take them away, that whole system could collapse. Right? And it's hard to just look at a food web and tell which one may be the keystone species. But after you study the ecosystem, you can figure out which ones would be. So this introduction here is just going to go over a couple examples. And what our agenda today is, so you know what a keystone species is, so you can define it. And there's a literary activity that goes along with it called What is a Keystone Species? There's also an interactive activity called Some Animals Are More Equal Than Others, where you're going to be watching video and then answering questions that go along with that to expand your knowledge about a keystone species. And tomorrow we will also be working with the same topic. But just to go over a couple things about keystone species, the great example would be the sea otters in Northern California in the Pacific Ocean. Right? There's lots of sea otters in that area, and there's huge kelp forest over there, which we don't have here. There's almost like a huge ecosystem similar to coral reefs, because that's where a lot of things live and they're born at and stuff, but they're just different. All right? But sea otters eat sea urchins. So if you've ever gone to the aquarium, you've probably seen sea urchins, little spiky balls. That's what the sea otters eat. The sea urchins eat the sea kelp. Okay, so this huge thing here. Like I said, these kelp forests act as like an ecosystem for like nurseries for young fish. It's a huge ecosystem going on there. Lots of feeding relationships going on. But the hunting sea otters, like they eat the sea urchins, so they keep the sea urchin population in control. If you remove the sea otters, the sea urchin population is going to overpopulate. When you have a lot of sea urchins eating, they're going to be eating all the kelp forest. So the kelp forest would disappear. Then all the things that get born there, like the nurseries for the young fish, disappear. So the whole ecosystem can collapse by the removal of the sea otter. Usually keystone species are going to be predators, but you don't necessarily have to be the apex predator. Like with the sea otters, orcas, other sharks, they have lots of different predators that eat sea otters. But the sea otters are the keystone species because they control the sea urchin and the sea kelp forest, okay? So their presence there balances out everything. Another example is the wolves of Yellowstone, which we're going to be looking at in a lot more detail tomorrow. But they were considered a pest species back in like the early 1900s, and they were exterminated from Yellowstone around the mid-1920s. And what wolves do, they hunt elk. All right. So when the wolves went away, the elk population greatly increased. But elk are herbivores. So very similar to the sea urchins, the elk would overeat, and they did. They overate a lot of the forest coverage in Yellowstone Park. And it also led to the decrease in the wetlands of Yellowstone Park. So the removal of the wolves impacted a huge like fall down from the food chain. The whole thing collapsed due to the removal of the wolves. So you can sort of see here the population here and like how that spikes up. So then the wolves get reintroduced though. Okay, so we brought the wolves back, and it started balancing out the elk population. So although the wolves are important predators, they're not the only factors that affect the elk population. And when we do another unit on populations, we're going to study a specific elk population case study. But there's other things like disease, drought, and fire, and other predators, obviously, out in Yellowstone. But the wolves, we're going to look at those a lot more detail tomorrow, okay? So just today's takeaway, make sure you do the assignment for what is a keystone species, and the assignment for some animals are more equal than others. And this will give you a good idea of what a keystone species is and why they're important to an ecosystem. If you have any questions, like always, please email myself or Coach Smith. Hope you guys have a great day. See you tomorrow.